In this video, we're going to be talking about how I focus for peak productivity using my deep work system. So we're going to start off by talking about the philosophy of deep work and why it is particularly important and why building your own deep work system will completely change your life. And then I'm going to go over my personal, fairly simple 4-step system that I've evolved over time on how to actually focus. If you are new to the channel, hello, my name is Ali. I'm a doctor turned entrepreneur, and I'm the author of the New York Times bestseller Feel Good Productivity, which is a book about how to do more of what matters to you in a way that actually feels good. And since 2017 on this channel, pretty much every week, I've been documenting my journey from broke medical student to working full-time as a doctor to now being an entrepreneur and author. And none of the success I've ever had would have been possible without having some sort of deep work system to actually focus on something for an extended period of time. So if you are in a stage of your life or your career where you would benefit from having more time in the day to actually focus, then building some sort of deep work routine or deep work system for yourself, I think will absolutely move the needle. And so I hope you enjoy this video. Let's get to part 1, where we start by zooming out a little bit. All right, so let's start by defining shallow work versus deep work. So Cal Newport defines shallow work as non-cognitively demanding, logistical style tasks, often performed while distracted. These efforts tend to not create much new value in the world and are easy to replicate. And then we have the definition of deep work, which is professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. And there's a few key phrases here. So for example, shallow work, he's arguing, is often performed while distracted, and distracted is unfortunately the state that most of us find ourselves in most of the time. Shallow work tends not to create much new value and tends to be fairly easy to replicate. Whereas deep work is a state of distraction-free concentration. This is often what we call focus. Now, crucially, deep work pushes our cognitive capabilities to their limit, i.e. it is hard, it is effortful. Deep work does not feel easy. And deep work tends to create new value and tends to be hard to replicate. Now, these definitions give us a little bit of a hint as to why deep work is so important. If you are anything like most people in my audience, you are somewhere along the freedom path. What is the freedom path? Well, the freedom path is the path from where you currently are to a place of freedom, often defined as financial freedom and time freedom and location freedom. Basically, where you have the freedom to do what you want with who you want and have a good time and work on your own terms and work from anywhere and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. Now, as it relates to work, there are actually 3 paths, I'm going to argue, that get you to this kind of dream life freedom-y type situation. You've got path A, you've got path B, and you've got path C. Boom, boom, and boom. Path number 1, or stream number 1, as I like to think of it, is the career stream. Stream number 2 is the side hustle stream. And stream number 3 is the entrepreneur stream. Now, what's interesting about this is that all 3 of these streams could take you to this version of freedom that you're aspiring to, where you have time freedom, financial freedom, location freedom, flexibility, you can do what you want, that sort of stuff. But each of these 3 streams have different characteristics. The career stream can get you there. Tim Cook, for example, the CEO of Apple, has never started his own business, but he's pretty rich. And he got there by working his way up through the ranks at IBM and then getting hired into Apple as like their operations guy and then like working his way up. And you can get to the freedom that you want through being an employee, through being part of a career. It tends to be slower and it tends to be less risky. And crucially, there is nothing wrong with being in the career stream if that's what you want to do. Then some people go from the career stream into the side hustle stream, where you're trying to keep a career going at the same time and also building some sort of side hustle with the hope that that side hustle makes an extra 5K a month, 10K a month, eventually, you know, makes enough money that you can go part-time in your career or maybe quit the career altogether. After a while in the side hustle stream, often when it's about making 5 to 10K a month, you could jump completely to the entrepreneur stream, try and build your own business, etc., etc. That tends to be a faster path to the freedom that you aspire to, but it tends to be a riskier path. Now, in this video, we're not going to go into the differences between these three streams. We're going to do more videos on that later. But the crucial thing to remember is that for all 3 of these streams, there is a key thing that you have to do in order to get to this freedom that you want. And that key thing is 2 words: create value. Within the context of a career, if you are trying to get to financial freedom, there is no way you will succeed at that unless you are creating value in some way for society, for your employer, for your boss, for your customers, whatever that might be. When you start your own side hustle, when you become an entrepreneur, there is no way to actually make money unless you are creating value in some way, because the only way to make money is to create value and then find other people who are willing to pay you for that value that you've created. Oh, by the way, if you are interested in sustainable routes to monetizing a side hustle, then you might like to check out Circle, who are very kindly sponsoring this video. Now, as a creator, one of the most common questions I get is how to actually earn a sustainable income online. And sure, there are plenty of ways of doing this, like ad revenue and sponsorships and affiliates and selling merch. But in my experience, one of the most fulfilling ways and most sustainable ways is by building a community. Now, when you set up your own community, you basically create a dedicated space around whatever your passion is. And that's a place where like-minded people can come together to learn, grow, and support each other. And you can make money doing this, which is where Circle comes in. I found Circle, in my experience, to be the absolute best platform to create and manage your own online community. We've been using it since 2020 for our part-time YouTuber Academy. We're also using it for our productivity lab, and we've even migrated all of our online courses over to Circle. So whether you're running courses or hosting live events or offering premium memberships, absolutely everything is all in one place. They've now even introduced built-in email marketing, so you can grow your audience, you can nurture them over time, and you can invite them to join your paid offerings, all without juggling a bunch of different tools. The cool thing about building a community like this is that you can see these connections forming amongst people online, and then those connections often translate. Like for example, for our YouTuber Academy and even for Productivity Lab, we've hosted and our members have also hosted in real life events, and it's all because everyone is together on these communities hosted on Circle. If you're looking to build a community full of people who share your interests and you want to invest in your content, then do give Circle a try. It is quick and easy and affordable, and you can test it out completely free for 14 days using the link in the video description. If you like it, Circle might just be the next step in turning your passion into a thriving and supportive and potentially even profitable community. So thank you so much, Circle, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. Now, coming back to our definition of shallow work versus deep work, overlaying all of this on here. Shallow work tends not to create much new value, whereas deep work tends to create new value. And so if we can create a system, a routine for being able to do more deep work and create more value, then whichever of these three streams we happen to find ourselves in, we are going to be working towards our goal of financial freedom, time freedom, location freedom, the freedom to do whatever you want. All right, now I'm going to double click on this create value thing because this is worth understanding. This is a video about deep work system. You can skip to the deep work system in the timestamps if you really want to, but my personal recommendation would be that if you understand the why behind this, it makes the motivation to build and maintain your own deep work system way stronger. Because to be honest, if you're watching this channel, you've probably seen some of my videos in the past, you've probably seen some self-help videos on YouTube, you've probably tried to solve the problem of focus and like distraction before, but unless you've had a compelling reason to solve it, unless you understand the why behind why we are even bothering to do this, it's really hard to sit down and just like focus for an extended period of time, not get distracted when amongst like TikTok and Instagram and social media and all of the other things you could be doing with your time. So that's why we are double clicking into this stuff. Anyway, let's double click into the create value thing. What the hell is value? Okay, well, there's various different ways of thinking about this, but the way I think of it is that you take raw materials, which might be worth, I don't know, $1. You then do stuff to the raw materials, and then it creates output, which might be worth, I don't know, $2. So in the process of the stuff, of doing the stuff, you have basically transmuted $1 worth of raw materials with the stuff that you're doing and created $2 out of it. Therefore, you have added $1 worth of value. Crucially, this output is only worth $2 if someone else is willing to pay the $2 for it. And so this is not like a subjective thing. It's not like, hey, I've created this piece of poetry and it's super, super valuable. It's valuable insofar as people are willing to pay for the thing. This is not the only definition of value. There are all sorts of other definitions of value. But if you're trying to get to financial freedom, then we have to be creating the sort of financial value that the market in this capitalist world that we live in, that the market values. Now, whatever your job is, you are probably not really converting actual raw materials into actual output. If you're a baker, for example, you are converting the raw materials of flour and sugar and milk and water and stuff. You're doing stuff to it, and then you're transforming it into bread, which you then sell at a bougie bakery for like $7 a pop. But I suspect if you're watching this channel, you probably don't have a physical manufacturing-y type job where that's what you do. I suspect if you watch this channel, you are doing some sort of knowledge work, where for the most part, you probably don't have too many raw materials for the thing that you're doing. And the key stuff that you are doing is using your brain. You are essentially using your brain, this is why it's called knowledge work. You're using your brain to your skills and your knowledge and stuff to transmute probably pixels on a screen into more pixels on a screen, and then you're trying to sell those extra pixels on a screen for something. This is how management consultants make money. They transform a blank keynote slide or PowerPoint slide into, with a bunch of research and a bunch of knowledge work and all this sort of stuff, into a PowerPoint presentation that they present to a client, and they charge stupid amounts of money for it, but they have created value, at least in the eyes of the client. So what does any of this have to do with deep work? Well, on this freedom path, in order to get to the freedom that we desire, we need to create value. And the way that we, probably you and me, create the value is by using our brains. And in order to use our brains effectively, we need the skill of deep work or focus, where essentially we need to sit still for an extended period of time, and we need to do cognitively demanding things that use our brain to try and create new value in the world. Crucially, this deep work and focus thing is sort of like a muscle. in that it can be trained, and you're doing it in a sort of reflective sort of way where you can improve the strength of that muscle over time and improve the strength of that system over time. Fundamentally, what all of that contributes to is that you are able to create more value in less time. That is ultimately, in many ways, the definition of productivity. Increased productivity is creating more value in less time. Now let's imagine two different people. One person is really good at doing deep work and really good at focusing. The other person is not very good at doing deep work and not very good at focusing. And let's imagine that both of these people have a day job. Maybe they're working 9 to 5 or whatever, and they both want to start some sort of side hustle that makes them an extra 5 grand a month, 10 grand a month, so that they can get to financial freedom, location freedom, time freedom, all of that sort of stuff. They're on the freedom path. Both of these two people have a job, and therefore, let's say they only have 5 hours a week to devote to their side hustle. Which of these people do you think is going to be quicker at getting to their goal of side hustle making 10 grand a month? Obviously, it's going to be the person who's good at deep work, right? Because the guy who sucks at deep work is going to get home and is going to be super demotivated, and they're going to sit down and they're going to have to figure out their business plan and figure out the business strategy and actually do the cognitively demanding things that it takes to get a side hustle or a business off the ground. And they're trying to do those things and they're all over the place. They're unable to focus. They're like getting distracted. They have their phones on. They're browsing Instagram reels and trying to answer emails while trying to do the work. And this person is still spending 5 hours a week on the side hustle, but the amount of value they are creating in that 5 hours a week is pretty low. Whereas this person spends the same 5 hours a week. They're not working any more. They're not working any harder. They're just fully focused. They're like less distracted in that time. They have discovered the power of a deep work routine. They have it scheduled into their calendar. They've got a system that they're following. They block off whatever distractions they can. They don't allow social media and the phone and Instagram reels and stuff to affect them while they're in that 5 hours of deep work. This person might well be consuming TV or entertainment or reading books and like having a life and all that kind of stuff, but they're just not doing that in their 5 hours a week. And yeah, even though money is not everything, money is like a pretty important thing if you're trying to get to the goal of financial freedom or even financial security. Like for some people, the goal of financial freedom is I just want to be free from the stress of paying the mortgage. For some people, it's I want to be a Dubai boy and have a yacht and all that kind of stuff. But whatever the thing is, like this person is creating way more value in those 5 hours than the person who sucks at doing deep work. And so coming back to our freedom path, figuring out some sort of deep work system, whether you use mine or whether you use anyone else's or whether you figure out your own, to be honest, what I would recommend you do is actually figure out your own. The point of this video is to just give you some ideas. The point is that when you figure out a deep work system, you are creating value in less time, which means whether you're doing the career stream or the side hustle stream or the entrepreneur stream, you're able to create the value that gets you to your goal of freedom a lot faster and a lot more likely. The final thing I will say on this front, which is I think is also important, is that on the freedom path, freedom is the destination that lots of us are aspiring to, but there are two other things as it relates to work that are more underrated, and those are what I think of as journey goals. And those two things are fun and fulfillment. Yes, everyone is striving for freedom, but generally what you realize when you get to freedom, by the grace of God, in a position where I am financially free. I don't need to work another day in my life if I don't want to. I can do whatever I want. I can do it whenever I want. I have time, location, and financial freedom. But what you realize when you get there is that freedom is a currency kind of like money, and freedom itself has no intrinsic value. Freedom only has value when it is exchanged for other things. Like if you, for example, had 168 hours completely free, you would be depressed pretty quickly if you had nothing to do with that time. The point of freedom is to be able to cash it in for fun and fulfillment and the other things that make life worth living. The freedom to spend more time with your kids, for example, gives you fulfillment and fun. The freedom to read or to play video games or to go on that walk in the middle of the day or to play squash in the evenings, that gives you fun and fulfillment. It's not really about the freedom, it's about what the freedom can get you, which is ultimately fun and fulfillment. Now, what's interesting is that on the freedom path, on your journey to freedom, you can in fact, and I would recommend you should find a way to experience fun and fulfillment, because whether or not you get to the destination, you will realize that the journey was what always mattered in the first place. But even when you do get to the destination, you realize, oh shit, like the destination is worthless on its own. The destination is only worthwhile in that it gives me fun and fulfillment. What does any of this have to do with deep work? Well, when you speak to people who have achieved freedom, time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom, you tend to find something fairly common, which is that firstly, these people still want to work as in do something that uses their skills, that feels like it is providing a meaningful contribution to someone or to society or something, which I would argue is the definition of work. They still want to be useful in some way. But if you ask these people like what sort of work they would want to do, they never ever say shallow work. They only ever say deep work. Like in your case, for example, let's say you had all the money in the bank and all the time in the world and you could do whatever you wanted. You might sip pina coladas on the beach in Thailand for about 2 weeks before realizing that makes you miserable and depressed, and you're going to want to find some sort of work to do. What sort of work would you like to be doing? You're probably not answering, "I'd like to answer emails while getting distracted on TikTok." Your answer is probably related to deep work to some degree. "I'd love to have 4 hours free every single morning to just focus on writing. I'd love to have hours each day where I can just focus on expanding my creative pursuits or my art or my music or my this, that, or the other." The reason I'm saying all this is because deep work is not just the means to an end. It is not just the way to create value, monetize that value, and then get to financial freedom. That's not the only thing that deep work is good for. Deep work is also the way you get fun and fulfillment from your work. And again, this is something that I don't think enough people talk about. Like, the skill of focusing, the skill of being able to sit down and just work on something for an extended period of time, that skill buys your financial freedom, but it also gives you fun and fulfillment. You feel way more fulfilled when you're in the flow state, when you're working on something that's hard, but that's within your limits, maybe at the edge of your limits, you're feeling like you're growing, you're feeling like time is absolutely flying, you get to the end of that session having done deep work, having been in the flow state, and you get that glow of fulfillment. You probably do not get that glow of fulfillment while you're distracted watching Instagram reels and answering emails and trying to do a zillion things at once. So that is why deep work is important. I hope if you're at this point in the video that you agree with me that deep work is really important, and cultivating the skill, building that muscle of focus, being able to deep work is vitally useful for fun, fulfillment, and financial freedom. Let's now move on to part 2, where we talk about my personal deep work routine, which I've built over the last several years of trying to get really good at this. Okay, so there are 4 steps to the deep work system, and what I would recommend you do, which is a philosophy that I talk a lot about in my book, Feel Good Productivity, which is now out, I think, on paperback. It's also hardback, Kindle, audiobook, paperback. I recorded the audiobook, so if you haven't read it yet, you should check it out, because it's a guide on how to enjoy your work, and we find that when we enjoy our work, it makes us more fulfilled, more creative, less stressed, more productive, etc., etc. Anyway, a key philosophy that I teach in the book, and that I'm keen on sort of making obvious on this channel, is that building your own productivity system is a very personal thing. Yes, you can copy and paste my system, you can copy and paste someone else's templates, but really by experimenting with what works for you and seeing what happens and then tweaking your own system, by building your own system, that is what will ultimately get you to the result that you want. And so in this video, I want to tell you what the 4 steps of my own personal deep work system are, so that hopefully you can get some ideas for how to apply them to yours. All right, so step number 1 is to actually schedule the deep work into the calendar. I have 2 methods of doing this. The first one is that I have an ideal week calendar. More details in that video up there about the Trident system of managing your time. Basically, I've got a separate Google Calendar, which is my ideal week, where I block out, in a dream world, what does my ideal ordinary week look like? Now here, I want to talk about 4 different types of deep work. Now this is from Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, and he defines there being basically 4 different ways of scheduling deep work into your calendar. Deep work method number 1 is monastic. This is monk mode before it was called monk mode, before it was cool. Method 2 is bimodal. Method 3 is rhythmic. And method 4 is journalistic. Now, the stuff around this stuff is very interesting. If you haven't yet read Deep Work by Cal Newport, I would recommend reading it. You could also get yourself the summary of the book Deep Work on short form. There is an affiliate link down below if you want to sign up to short form. It's the world's best service for reading summaries of books. They even have a summary of my book. And I read the summary of my own book and I was like, damn, this is an annoyingly good summary of my own book. So there's a link down below if you want to check it out. But let's talk about these 4 different ways of scheduling deep work into your calendar. Monastic is the monk mode thing, where it's like you carve out an extended period of time to just do deep work. This is like going on a writing retreat for a whole week. Probably not suitable for most people because most of us can't take a whole week off to just do deep work in a focused fashion. We can maybe do it some of the time. I occasionally do the monastic thing. If when I was on deadline for my book, I went to Bali to give a talk and I just stayed there for an extra week just focusing on the book. That's just not feasible for most people for most part of life. So I generally ignore the monastic approach. Then you have the bimodal approach, which works for some people, which is basically where you have some days that are entirely deep work days and some days that are entirely shallow work days. Then you have the rhythmic approach, which is trying to build a daily rhythm for yourself as it relates to deep work. This is what I do. I focus on the first 4 hours of every day being focused on deep work, usually making videos or working on one of my courses or working on one of my books, because that is the key way in which I add value. And then finally you have journalistic, which is kind of named after, I think, journalists, where they're just sort of doing so much random shit that they're just trying to squeeze in random small amounts of time of deep work here and there because they literally don't have any other choice. Back when I had a real job working as a doctor, I was really unable to do a lot of these things because I had an unpredictable schedule based on call rotas and work and that kind of thing. So while I was at work, I had a sort of journalistic approach to deep work, where I would squeeze in time in the middle of the day or like an extra 20 minutes on my lunch break, that sort of thing, to be able to work on videos. Or for example, if I happened to be on night shifts for a week and then I had 3 days off, I'd be like, all right, in those 3 days, I'm going to be absolutely laser focused on deep work in the monastic sort of camp. Because I'm like, in those 3 days, I can bang out so much stuff for my videos or for my course or whatever the side hustle thing I was working on. When my side hustle of this YouTube channel and the business around it was enough to be able to quit my day job as a doctor, suddenly I had free time to be able to do whatever I wanted, essentially. And I experimented with all the different types of deep work, and I landed on rhythmic. So the first 4 hours of every day are focused on deep work. So that's like 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. Then 1 till 2, I'll have lunch. 2 till 3, I'll, in theory, attempt to go to the gym. And then 3 to 6 is sort of like shadow work, meetings, all this sort of stuff. But it basically guarantees that roughly the first 4 hours of the day are focused on deep work. So that is step one of the whole thing. Figure out what sort of schedule you would like to schedule your deep work into. And generally when I coach people on this, because people come up to me on the streets and want to do talks and stuff sometimes and ask like, I'm really struggling to focus, or, students in my YouTuber Academy or Productivity Lab who struggle to focus, usually they haven't done step one, which is to actually schedule the deep work into the calendar. It must be scheduled into the calendar, otherwise it's not going to happen. So let's say you have scheduled the deep work into your calendar. Then what do you do when you get to that slot? Well, at this point we have points 2, 3, and 4. So the first one is, as part of my deep work system, is I take 5 minutes to align and organize. This is part of my life productivity system, which I'm releasing as a course at some point soon. If you want to sign up to my newsletter, you'll hear more about it if you want. But anyway, 5 minutes, align and organize. Basically, I spend 5 minutes at the start of every deep work session, firstly figuring out what do I actually want to accomplish in this deep work session, because it's very, very, very useful to have a goal. Research around flow state and all this sort of stuff says that it's very difficult to achieve flow when you don't have a clear goal that you're working towards. So that is the point of aligning. And then secondly, I have organize, which is basically where I make sure I have a cup of water or a cup of coffee if it's sufficiently early in the day, which it often is because it's in the first 4 hours. I make sure I have all the materials that I need to actually do the thing, because something that's going to distract me from deep work is having to get up off my desk or off the coffee shop and like go and do something. I make sure I've done a wee so that I don't need to do a wee or a poo in the middle of my deep work session. And in those 5 minutes, I do a little bit of a startup routine. So I have, for example, these headphones, which is a nice little blue color, or I just whack in my AirPods. Or if I'm on my actual desk and there's no one else in the room, I'll play some music. I'll put on my Study With Me playlist on Spotify, because I know that that always gets me into the sort of focus zone. And I think this sort of startup routine is actually really helpful, because what it does is that it eases you into the focus. For a lot of people, it's like, even if you have scheduled in the deep work, it comes to sitting down to do it. And then there's this enormous like activation energy barrier of like, oh, but like I don't want to sit down and do the hard thing because like, I don't want to do it. And I used to have that a lot. I still have that to this day. But what I can do is that firstly, I can set a goal, because it's easy enough to do that. It doesn't take that much cognitive manpower to be able to set a goal. And what I can also do is put on my headphones, put on my nice music, sort of make sure I've got my little coffee, I've got my little water, make sure I've got my desk organized in a nice way. It's all these like tiny little things that help me ramp up towards the actual focus block. Then step 3, we have focus, which I often do for about 50 minutes. But to be honest, the focus time varies. I'm not wedded to doing it for 50 minutes. I tend to just do it for however long it takes me to start to lose focus. Sometimes it's 50 minutes, sometimes it's 45. Sometimes if I'm really tired or like I've just got lots of shit going on in my brain, it's only 15 minutes where I'm focusing for 15 minutes and then I start to feel like, oh, I'm itching to get distracted and do something else. If you want more details on exactly how to stay focused, I've got a whole evidence-based guide up there somewhere. There's like a 3-part playlist on how to actually focus, which is about maximizing the use of this time here. And then finally, I spend the final 5 minutes of the session on reflect and recharge. And crucially, one thing I do in this section, if I'm in a stage of life where I'm struggling to focus, is something I've talked about in videos a lot, the focus log. What is the focus log? The focus log is basically where you log the amount of time you spent actually focused on deep work. This is something Cal Newport absolutely swears by in his book, Deep Work. If there is just one thing you do that will radically, completely change your relationship to deep work and focus, it's actually just keeping track of how many minutes or hours each day are you actually spending focusing. This is something I was really bullish on when I first taught my life productivity system course to students in Productivity Lab about 9 months ago. And I was so bullish on this that we built templates and systems and processes into our course and into our community that helped people do their focus log. And we had so many testimonials from students who took that course, who basically took that advice and said that, damn, actually tracking the number of minutes I spend each day focusing, A, made me realize how little time I actually spend focusing on deep work, and B, gave me awareness of that problem so that I was able to increase that time. There's all sorts of stuff in the world of business, Alex Hormozi talks about this a lot, around measurement as intervention. Like there's all those studies of people who want to lose weight. If you just weigh yourself every day, you are by default going to lose some weight because now you're aware of what that number is. Most of us who struggle with focus, you probably struggle with focus if you're at this point in the video, you like this idea of the deep work system, you probably have no idea how many minutes each day you actually spend focusing on deep work. And if there is just one thing you were to apply to your life from this entire video, if you just start tracking however you want, you could do it on a post-it note, you can do it on a notebook, you can do it on an app, you can use whatever. You don't need a fancy tool for this. You don't need a fancy template. You can just do it on a Google Sheet. I do it on a Google Sheet these days because can't be asked to deal with the apps. If you just track the number of minutes or hours you spend each day focusing, and the goal is 4 hours, or rather that's the upper limit. There's a great book called Rest by Alex something or other. I've got it in the living room over there, but the name eludes me. Rest. He cites a lot of evidence and a lot of anecdotes from people throughout time that says that about 4 hours a day is about the upper limit of how long humans can focus for. So the goal is to actually track your focus hours through your focus log and get that number to about 4 hours a day. Man, if you could do 4 hours a day, you are absolutely off to the races. I don't even do 4 hours a day, and I have full control over my time and I can do whatever I want. I maybe sometimes manage to do like 2 and a bit, or like 3 and a bit, or like back when I was working on my book, I would get up to 4 and then like the whole day would be gone, because actually for 4 hours of focus, it's actually really hard to get in 4 hours of uninterrupted focus. It obviously doesn't happen all in one go. It happens in like strips and bits and spurts and drips and drabs, but the goal is 4 hours. If you just do that one thing, just track how many hours you are spending focusing each day, and then trying to get that number up to 4 hours, you will be completely transformed and your life will never be the same ever again, because now you have figured out some sort of deep work system. But unless you know what that number is, unless you are tracking how many minutes each day you are actually focusing, it's very difficult to actually improve on the thing, because as Peter Drucker famously said, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets measured gets improved. So that is the system that I personally use pretty much every day to focus for peak productivity. It's a system that I've built over the years of being obsessed with productivity, to the point where I realized that, damn, this focus deep work stuff is super important. And without having some sort of deep work system, I would not be at anywhere near the level of financial freedom, if that's what you care about, as I currently am. And so my sincere hope for you is that the thing that you take away from this video is that A, it's worth building your own deep work system, and B, it's worth tracking the numbers so that you can actually improve your deep work system. And I would love to get an email from you a few weeks, months, or years from now saying that like, whoa, I've been tracking my focus minutes for the last like X number of time and it's just completely changed my life, because I know that doing that did it for me, and I hope that it will do it for you as well. If you are interested in more details on how to focus, I've got my 3-part playlist on how to focus over there somewhere. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in the next video. Bye-bye.